Our next speaker is Suzanne Stradling, who will be speaking about hydroelectric management on the Rio Chama, balancing competing ecological priorities.
So, my name is Suzanne Stradling. I'm an environmental and energy economist, and I'm here to talk about saving the world. So, I stumbled into this saving the world gig. I actually just meant to look at the economic impacts of changing water flow at the Elvado Dam on the Rio Chama. So I looked at the power implications and the reservoir recreation implications and the tourism implications, and then I looked at the environmental values associated with it, and that's where it got really interesting. The Rio Chama is beautiful. It's a wild and scenic river, and it's one of the most biodiverse areas in New Mexico. I think we all understand that there is intrinsic value to that. But there is another environmental issue at play here. Electricity production in the United States is responsible for over a quarter of greenhouse gas emissions. If we want to avoid climate change, we need to do something about that. Solar panels are our golden ticket to a carbon-free grid. But the problem with solar is that when the sun goes down, it stops producing energy. At the same time, it gets dark and we all flip on our lights. And so what we see is a dramatic increase in demand for electricity. And this increase is more dramatic the more solar we have on the grid. So what do? Batteries are not sufficient. In 2020, in California alone, we're talking about 13,000 megawatts of energy that has to come online in a little less than 3 hours. That's enough energy to power 13 million homes. What we use instead are natural gas or jet turbines. These are basically jet engines. They're dirty and they're expensive. We could choose to increase our hydroelectric production from the 5 to 8 o'clock hours. That would decrease our emissions, and that would increase our ability to use solar panels that exist on the grid and to introduce new solar panels onto our system. Why don't we? Well, it has real implications for the riverine environment. It degrades beaches. It injures species. This green versus green trade-off is at the core of my research. So how do we value the environment? We ask people. We want to know how much New Mexicans value this particular stretch of the Rio Chama versus their value that they put on decreasing greenhouse gas emissions by a certain amount. When we have that answer, we can better manage the Rio Chama, but we can also start looking at other dams. This is important because hydroelectric dams store an immense amount of energy. They are the big batteries that we need. And they may be our ticket to a zero carbon grid, and yes, to saving the world. But we have to know our trade-offs. We have to know the pros and the cons. And my research gives us insight into the questions we need to ask and the tools we need to use so that we don't destroy our environment as we try to save it. Thank you.
Suzanne, this is your opportunity to tell us why economists will save the world.
The fact is, we all have great ideas, but we really have to choose the ideas that make the biggest difference. We have to go for the big impact thing, and that's one of the things that the cost-benefit analysis that economists do can give us. I think that's really important. I know it's not sexy and fun, but it's really important.
And where are you from, Suzanne?
I'm actually from Los Alamos.
And what do you hope to do with this when you're done?
I'm really interested in the ways that we're going to change the electric grid over the next 20 years. And so I want to be researching in that area, seeing what happens to our capital investment in electricity, particularly as we look at our issues with carbon production.
Great. Thank you so much.
Thank you.